Hello, John Terrell here. Pull a chair up to the fireside at Château Cube, where we talk about life, limited magic, and cube draft. My guest today is Usman Jamil. I'm sure many of you know Usman by reputation. He's one of the godfathers of the format that we love so well. Usman is, of course, a host of the Third Power podcast with Anthony Avatolo. It's the longest-running cube podcast around. It's been on for 10 years now. Usman has been writing articles about Cube for a very long time. He's written for Quiet Speculation, for Star City Games, and most recently for CoolStuffInc. Usman is not only a good friend, but I have to say he has been an inspiration to me as a cube designer. I've been reading his articles for years. Usman's ways of framing Cube, of explaining the charms of the format, and of theorizing what makes the format tick, and how we can make the format better, continue to inform my thinking about Cube to this day. So I am honored and delighted to welcome Usman to Château Cube. Who is Usman in a tweet?
Cube designer person, cat person, cube person, cat dad. It's like those biographies like people put on Twitter. Like it's either like something really like just something like way too serious, or something that's just like something really short, like LOL beans or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, all right.
Yeah, or like a serious thing, but then you have to throw in some silly thing at the end, like, I'm a financial analyst for some company you've never heard of, and I love nacho cheese.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess it's just like cube designer, cat dad.
Yeah, cube designer and cat dad. That's good.
Yeah.
Cube content creator on all sorts of platforms.
Yeah. Like when Anthony and I are riffing before recording, we're just like, what episode title is this again? Because we have no idea.
Uh-huh.
And
Right.
so, and then when we do that and try to figure out the advertising slogan for the set, we'll look it up. We'll look up our previous episodes to find which sets because we still haven't done Modern Horizons, and that's gonna be fun. But it's just like,
that'll be an undertaking for sure.
oh, that's gonna be marathon. But I remember like we were looking that up and we're trying to find the number. I don't even remember what number it is. We're just like, when was the last time we recorded? And we looked it up and it was like August. We're just like,
Yeah.
wow, I know it had been forever, but Jesus.
Yeah, it's been a while. I can understand that. It's hard to juggle all of one's real life responsibilities and also wanting to do awesome cube things and play cube, for goodness sake.
Yeah, that's what's gonna be awkward too when all this coronavirus, assuming it's still a thing when the new set comes out or when Korea previews happen. Like before, I'm literally just like getting them printed out, or even if I just make like really bad handwriting because my handwriting sucks, it's just like, all right, here we go, a 1 and a white for a 2/2, and it's just like it's legible and that's it with no picture. And I'm just not going to be able to do that when that's going on. Like I'm not going to be like, hey guys, I know there's this pandemic going on, but you guys want to still cube? Because no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, I know. That's a crying shame.
Yeah, so I'll just probably like. I remember back in the day before I was able to regularly cube, I would like literally have to play cube games against myself.
Yeah.
You ever try to split a fact
that.
fiction?
I've certainly done that as well. Yeah.
You ever try to split a fact or fiction? I've gotten really good at splitting fact or fictions because of that, but it's just like, how are you supposed to do that? Or Hangman, like, I don't know if you remember that card, Hangman, from one of the unsets.
Yeah.
Yeah, like how are you supposed to do that? Like, I know what the word is, but this person doesn't. Usually whenever that happens, I'm just like, don't put that in my test decks or something, but it's just like, oh my God. Like,
Yeah, maybe find one of those tables that has letter frequency and English words or something, and
oh, nice. I like that. Or just like ask on Twitter. Just be like, all right, so my opponent has Hangman.
there you go. Make it a Twitter poll or something. Yeah, that'd be cool.
And then the game.
That's a good call. Yeah, you have to try to adopt some sort of multiple personality disorder thing. You got to be like Dexter and have your own dark traveler or whatever he calls it. What are some of the developments in Magic that you've been most excited about of late?
Heirloom Blade? Sure, let's do that.
Heirloom Blade, yeah. That's signature Usman tech there. That's a
That
good card.
that's a great card. I really hope people are starting to realize how good that card is. Although, like, I don't tend to see a lot of like casual cube people who draft like Magic Online cubes probably don't know how good Heirloom Blade is. But like, whenever somebody asks for cube advice, I'm just like, "Do you have Heirloom Blade in your cube?" And looks at the list, and they do. I'm like, okay, all right, that's my job's done. Goodbye or whatever. It's like
Right? You may cross the bridge.
I was like, do you have enough one drops? How many one drops do you have? 3. All right, you got to add some more of those. All right, my job's done. Add some more one drops. In terms of recent developments, like I don't know. I guess just coming out with more stuff. It feels
Yeah.
kind of like they're really pushing how far they can go in terms of like overload. And I feel like this whole pandemic thing is probably gonna throw a wrench into that because like people are, uncertain and like luxury products are it's kind of weird too because it's kind of like it's an escape from a lot of that stuff too. It's just like you don't it just felt like in 2019 there was just as like a content producer I was just burned out. I just remember being like,
Right.
here's this set, here's this set, here's this set, and like literally going like right into it, like here's this, and then like people were burnt out from that, and then they
Yeah.
course corrected. And I'm wondering if they're going to do that in terms of like new products, but I don't think they are. And I feel like, if anything, they're probably making more stuff, if anything, for the short term, like all the
Yeah.
secret layer stuff, which is fine.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not complaining about it. I try to get foils if I can, but I'm not going to break the bank for it. Like, if I can find a cheap one, back
Yeah.
before like the whole like MTG finance or whatever, or people trying to take advantage of arbitrage, just going through dollar binders and as a youngster, I would just go through like bargain bins of CDs and just like rifle through them super fast. And I was like, all right, does this look vaguely metal? Okay, I'll pause on this one. Or do I recognize this? Was this Queensryche Operation Mindcrime? Okay, get that one. And just go through super fast. So I could kind of do that already for
Yeah.
cards. And I was just doing that in the dollar binders. Just like I remember one time I think finding I think it was like a Japanese Kira Great Glass Spinner for $1.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Nice.
I was like, all right, this card looks cool. Just try it that way and then do that. So that was cool. Like that. I think that's a nice thing too about Cube too. Is just like at least when I was starting, to sound like an old man, it's just like back in the day there was no Cube tutor.
Mm-hmm.
There was like Tom Lapilli's Cube list. There was some dude Snazorama. There wasn't a lot of Cube lists, and you just going through a lot of that discovery of just like combodeck.net or Gatherer. I don't know if people even use Gather nowadays. They probably do if they're working
Yeah.
off Scryfall. That's
Yeah.
probably it.
Yeah. If they don't know Scryfall, yeah, probably. And all of these Wizards articles link to Gather. I've got
That's true.
some Chrome browser extension that detects magic card names on websites and then makes a helpful little mouse over link for me and pulls the image off Scryfall. That's awesome.
Oh, nice.
How has your cube design changed over the years? It sounds like you've changed in your approach in the sense that we didn't have Cube Cobra or Cube Tutor, and I was this way too. When I started cubing, I was doing everything on spreadsheets. I was doing everything in
Mm-hmm.
Excel.
Yep.
The ways in which we organize Cube has changed dramatically. What are some other things that come to mind for you and how cube design has changed?
I think it was like one of the kind of like earliest moments in cube design. There was somebody locally who had a pauper cube. It was I don't really like use the term unplayable because it tends to be really overly used often, like someone using it to describe anything that's just like suboptimal or even
Right.
perception of like I don't like this card, it's unplayable even if it's actually good. And like I'm sure there were lots of people saying that the Elspeth from Theros 2 is unplayable,
Uh-huh.
even though that's not really the case at all. But like aggro decks in that Pauper Cube were literally unplayable. Like it
Yeah.
never 3-0'd a draft. It never did well. What we would do is I was a pretty regular at F&M for draft at the time, we would do draft at F&M, and then we would go to Denny's after to usually do a cube draft or whatever. We would draft his Pauper Cube somewhat, we would draft it enough times there. I think he went to the bathroom or something, and like one of the newbies asked for advice, and one of the spiky people was just like, all right, in this guy's cube, you always want to get like maximum value out of everything. You never want to pay echo. You always want to pay kicker. You always want to try to get every single drop of value out of a card because you're never punished for going under or whatever. There's probably a good term for this, but I can't think of it. But it's you never want to evoke, because like if you do evoke a Muldrifter, usually it's when you're digging for something or there's some kind of time constraint in the game, like you're getting down or whatever. But like
right, you're not going to be under a great deal of pressure. It doesn't sound like.
Yeah, I think pressure. Yeah, that's the word. And it kind of opened my eyes which it seems weird. It felt like a lot of people, myself included, kind of didn't take that kind of in the trenches POV very much. It was very just like in the clouds or whatever, very much just like, I'm going to put this card in my cube because of tension and, whatever, and all this kind of stuff that people imagine that drafters think is like, if I put Executioner's Capsule in my cube, there'll be this tension between like just like artifacts and just like black creatures, like all this kind of stuff, which doesn't really happen in reality. I forget how long it took for that really to fully manifest. We had Marshall on an episode of the Third Power once where we talked about kind of that spiky, kind of like approaching it from the player's POV, assuming they want to win the draft, rather than this highfalutin kind of like this tension and whatever, just like the drafters enjoy having access to worse cards or whatever. And, just like these ideologies, which, I think I asked him, one of the questions I asked him was like, if somebody says there's like this theme in your cube, like if there's like a +1/+1 counters theme, how often do you usually tend to believe them that it's a good deck? He's like, usually not. Like, usually it's just like, someone's like, this theme is really good. Someone's got to show me that it's good for me to believe, which, makes sense because like, if someone's like, yeah, I've got this +1/+1 counters theme, which has cross synergies and whatever. And it's just like, that's great. But if it doesn't realistically line up with the rest of the meta, then it's just not really doing anything in the format, or it's just not worth it. And it's just like someone can have this idea that their +1/+1 counters theme or whatever can be on equal footing with just like a blue control deck that's like the best deck in their cube or whatever. Or like there was another local cube where just like it wasn't a Pauper Cube, but it was another, I guess it was a fully powered. Yeah, it was a fully powered cube, but it was kind of like, it's like kind of stock. And aggressive decks were never good. And I would always just force like the 5-color, all the non-basics, all the mana rocks, which would always be weird because I'm like, the first deck that I played as a kid was like mono white aggro. And I'm mostly an aggro player at heart. And it was just like, but control was by far the best deck.
Yeah.
There's even like some other cubes where I was just like, do the same thing. I think especially in recent years, just kind of being realistic of where your meta or where my meta is and trying to at least balance with that in mind. I feel like sometimes people tend to balance with what they think is the meta, but isn't really the case. And, just like trying to be more realistic in terms of what people think.
Yeah, your description of this, the perspective of the person in the trenches, that's a really interesting way of looking at it that does contrast with how cube designers typically approach their cubes, which tends to be more like, how I guess it was in the 18th century, there were the deists, like the founding fathers were deists who...
Like the clockmaker.
Yeah, right. They conceived of God as the great clockmaker who makes the watch and then goes wandering off into the sunset or something.
Yeah.
So, people tend to approach cubes in that way, I think. Taking this perspective from on high and making the watch and then sitting back and watching smugly as it ticks and people interact with it. It's definitely worth thinking about what the impression of the cogs in the machine are or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's like something I like whenever we have like excess people show up for cube in those scenarios where I'm usually the first to dip out just so I can watch, because like I would rather it's a different perspective, being able to watch what's going on. And like it's definitely cool seeing that stuff happen. Like, somebody achievement unlocking the 5-color mode on Nagila. It's just like, whoa, is this actually happening or whatever?
Yeah, is
Just
that
like,
a thing that one can do, right?
yeah, what works, and if it doesn't, why, kind of thing, or just like, just like, why isn't this working, or what do decks actually look like, or I forget if I've ever used this phrase in a podcast or anything, but it's like, whenever somebody does like a deck tech, they're not going to be like, okay, this deck is terrible. We're doing this for the memes or the lulls or whatever. But nobody, a lot of the times it's just coming from uncertainty. It's just like, I think, like, not I know. And like, nobody really comes into it being like, I expect this to do terribly. Or like, they look at their draft deck and it's not often, I guess it can happen in draft when somebody like train wrecks a draft and they're just like, well, this deck is going to do terrible because in an 8-person draft, somebody's going to go 0-3.
Well, that also shows that you've got long experience and confidence in your abilities. Because I do have friends who, every single time they draft, they're like, "Oh, what have I done? This thing is I'm never gonna win a game with this deck. It's just a complete pile." So I think some people do have the
Yeah.
opposite reaction. I'm glad that's not true of you. I'm usually excited about my deck, but I
hmm
also often have some reservations. Like I wish I could have gotten, some particular component.
There's like in our cube league, I did a draft. I essentially just, I don't know. Sometimes I get on deck kicks where I'm just like,
Yeah.
for those like months, I'm just like, I'm the blue white aggro control deck or whatever, and I just like end up in it somehow for months, or just like I'm gonna play the red aggro deck or whatever. And like lately, it's just been, I think, just because people locally don't value their mana fixing like they should, they're just not eating their veggies. It's just like I end up with like a 5th pick fetch land. I'm just like, playing this trench coat stupid deck, and it's just like with 2 basics and then just like a bunch of just like aggro stuff. So I drafted it in Sir Funcelot's cube where I just like forced it. I'm just like, okay, we're just gonna force this stupid deck because I've got to play the part of this deck. This being me. And I was like, this deck looks like it should be fine. And I just like mopped the floor with everybody. And I didn't expect to. I'm just like I think during a game there was one time I think I got like Oko out and also the black red Duretti, and I didn't realize it until I had them both in play at the same time. Just like, wait, I can make a food and then sack that food to kill something. I'm just like,
Nice.
I was like,
That's a
what?
pretty good interaction.
Yeah, my opponent was like on mono green, just like mid range beef, and they all died. I'm just like,
Yeah.
what? What is going on here? Yeah, and I'm just like, well, I didn't expect that deck to just like. I think I lost a game out of the 3 matches, and then my opponent on red green mid range like switched it up to aggro, and I was just completely caught off guard. I was like,
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, somebody's doing the transformational sideboard versus me, huh? All right, well,
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that feels good.
and I was like, all right, I'm gonna adjust to this, and we'll see what happens. And brought in all my
Yeah, well, it sounds
load.
like you had the tools to adjust to whatever they threw at you.
Yeah, I feel like people don't do the transformation. They tend to not sideboard as often as they should, but I mean that's
Yeah.
I don't know. But I'm just like, all right, we're totally transformational sideboarding. I'm taking out 10 cards, putting
Well, yeah, I think sideboarding is sort of easier and harder in Cube than in Retail Limited. Like, it's easier in the sense that you've got a much deeper pool to draw
Mhm.
from. You've got many more good cards, but it's also harder because I think people tend to draft cards that are better on theme. So, like, totally transforming the deck is less likely.
I've done it because I don't know, I guess I'm just a madman or something. I've definitely pulled the takeout. It's just become like a local, just like an in joke or a meme or whatever, where it's just like, all right, I'm gonna take out 10 cards. Just like I'm just like playing against the mid range deck with aggro. I'm just like, well, this isn't gonna work. And it's like
Yeah.
during the game, I'm just like constantly looking at my sideboard. I'm like, what? Okay, how do I sideboard this? And then I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna play this out, see what your deck has, see your threats, and just like game 2 is like just like take out like 12 cards or
Yeah.
something. It's like, now I'm a control
Yeah.
deck.
Your opponent sees you go into the land box and is like, oh no.
Or I think I did that first, and then I started putting like basic lands in.
Oh, yeah. In your sideboard. Well, that five color pile that you're describing is super interesting because, on the one hand, I've got an experience similar to yours, which is that, especially when I'm cubing in the dark, cubing a format blind or without a great deal of knowledge about the format, that's a go to strategy for me. It tends to be more successful than trying to draft, say, a mono red aggro deck when I'm not sure that it's supported at the rate that I think it should be.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you kind of know what like a blue-white control deck would look like. The
Yeah.
exact parts might differentiate from cube to cube. Like one might have Baneslayer Angels as its finishers, one might have like Gideon Jura or, just other finishers. One might have like Brightling or whatever. Just like the individual the macro is the same, the micro is probably different. And I think that's another thing in terms of like overall cube design that I think has changed a lot for me in the past. Is just like focusing a lot more on the macros than like the individual parts. It's kind of like probably. Are you familiar with the show Good Eats?
Is it the Alton Brown thing? Or is
Yeah,
that something
yeah,
else? Yeah.
yeah. So like he's very like methodical in terms of like how he approaches cooking, but like, and that's what really got me into cooking. Just like watching, it was an episode of Good Eats that I watched at like 2 in the morning about potatoes and being like,
Okay.
what is this? And just like going super in depth about it and really getting into it. But the more experienced I've kind of gotten and more confident I've gotten in cooking, in kind of like that is just like focusing more. Whenever I've posted recipes like on Discord, it's usually just like, I'm sure you've seen them where it's just like, here's this and this and this and this and this. And it's just like this doctoral thesis of ingredients. It's just like, here's all this. It ends up looking like a mole, but moles are made. It's just like here's this orange. It's like here's this orange zest and chocolate, like coffee and all this stuff. And someone looking at it be like, "What coffee? Like what's this? Like this makes no sense." But it's just like somebody's, like they're, just like an Italian grandma who's been cooking for, however many years, or like somebody's like auntie or their abuela who's been making a recipe by hand because they kind of know the macros or kind of know the general process.
Right. It's like a theme and variations.
Hmm.
You know
Yeah.
more or less what you're doing, and then you can adjust things. And
Yeah. Or it's just like figuring out like what works and what doesn't or something. It's just like if you use like sake versus like white wine as a deglazer or something, it's
yeah.
individual parts might be different, but the overall thing is going to be the same ish.
Hmm.
And I think like I kind of do the same thing when I draft a cube blind like you do, where kind of go with what works. And if someone's going to, show me, it's like I have this infinite combo thing with like Presence of Gond or whatever, I'll just be like, show me, just like
Yeah.
I'm just gonna do whatever. I'm just gonna go with whatever I feel is probably the best archetype. And if
Right.
like aggro is not really good, it's usually like the 5 color deck because it can go over the top of everybody and can do literally anything.
Yeah.
Which is just like I'm gonna double splash for I'm trying to think of the greediest splash I've done before. I think I've probably splashed dig through time. I think that's kind of like how I've changed kind of in my ideologies, less on the like micro and more of just like here's how everything works. Like when I wrote for SUG, my column I called it like holistic wisdom, but
Hmm.
nobody knew what it was about, even though like the blurbs would be like Usman Jamil talks about Mirrodin Besiege for Cube, but people would be like, why is this holistic wisdom? I'm just like,
Uh-huh.
all right, fine. Well, I'll just stick the word cube in it in the beginning. Maybe people can figure it out. I don't know if they ever did, but
Well, look, I called my channel Cultic Cube, so at least I've got Cube in there, but Cultic was definitely an infelicitous choice of name. Everybody's
I
like,
mean, it
Cult,
works.
Cult of Cube, so I feel you with the name problems.
Yeah. But like a lot of it, I think that was another thing too. Like I tended to look at things a lot more holistically in a way, kind of like wanting to have things in kind of like my mind be balanced rather than how they actually were.
Mm,
Just like if you don't have perfectly balanced color sections, it's going to ruin everything versus it probably won't. And it kind of happened, just like I'd seen people do it. And I'd kind of done that in my own cube where like when trying new stuff out, especially during Eldraine, when like I just didn't have as much time anymore, and like we were just getting a deluge of absurdly good cards in like machine gun fashion. I
Yeah.
wouldn't have time to be like, all right, what black card am I taking out for Murderous Rider? What white card am I taking out for Giant Killer? What multicolor card am I taking out for Oko? I'll just be like, okay, this
Yeah.
card. I'm just like, I'm taking out this card. I'm taking out this card. And just like, so the color sections were pretty. I think we're imbalanced, but I don't remember how much. But in the wash, it didn't really matter.
No,
It wasn't
it
like,
doesn't. It doesn't matter. Not within reason, or maybe even out of reason. I don't know, because you could design an environment where you're very intentionally skewing colors.
yeah, it's just like I think there's a perception is like if you have two Simic cards or like five Simic cards versus like two Rakdos, if that's
Hmm.
really going to
That's
break
the
things.
problem. Yeah.
And like overall, it usually doesn't. Like it's
No.
just because the sample sizes in Cube are so small. Like if it's a cube that's probably being drafted over and over and over and over and over and over and over, like multiple times a day, like Magic Online cubes are. But if it's just like your cube that you're drafting at most once a week, maybe twice, it still just doesn't really matter. It's
Yeah.
kind of like that. Did you ever see that picture? There's a compilation, like a timeline of pictures of Picasso where he kind of does self-portrait at 15 and it looks like really realistic because that's just it looked like him, and then it
Uh-huh.
was a drawing, it was like a painting of him at 40 where it kind of looked more abstract, and then like a self-portrait at like 86 where it looks like super like very 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 abstract, like not kind of vaguely resembling a human.
Okay.
And I don't think I'm gonna go like full Picasso, but I feel like I've definitely kind of like loosened how uptight I am kind of on Cube.
Well, Picasso is the father of Cubism, so I can.
Yep.
You're proceeding in the right direction. It sounds like.
Yeah. It's like in my reviews before they would be like really dry and boring, but that's not really how I tend to my delivery, especially on like on the third power too, is just like very free flowing. It's just
Hmm.
how my brain
Yeah,
is like
sort
when
of
I talk to
stream of
people.
consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just
But
like,
you make cool analogies, like you were just talking about cooking as it relates to cube.
yeah. And it wasn't like I prepared that statement, pun intended.
No,
But it was
right.
just like this is just how I am, just like I'll make references to stupid little things or whatever.
With respect to this five color raccoons in a trench coat thing you were describing, I've been moving increasingly in my own design towards trying to move away from supporting that kind of strategy, or maybe not moving away from supporting it, but trying to ensure that it's not the odds on best deck in the format,
Yeah.
but that others are viable as well. So for CubeCon, I designed two cubes, which were radically different. One was a set cube, a Ravnica set cube, or like, Ravnica extended, all three blocks. And there, of course, it's a gold forward cube, but I tried to reward people for picking a lane, picking a guild, and sticking to that and not doing too much splashing into, maybe three color decks, but 4 and 5 were going to be increasingly difficult.
Hmm.
So I made fixing not great in the sense that there's a ton of guild gates. I broke Singleton and was running maybe 4 guild gates for each guild, and then also bounce lands and things.
Hmm.
I ended up running none of the rocks, no signets for sure, but not even like key runes and so on. So, anyway, that was one approach to reducing the power of the 5 color deck. The second cube I was designing is a legacy environment, or between legacy and vintage environment. I removed almost all of the gold cards. I focused in an extremely robust way on aggro, mid-range, and control. There's not much combo, and there's plenty of fixing in that environment. But I was trying to reward people for really saying, I'm going to play a base green mid-range deck and just going for that, or whatever the case may be. So
Hmm.
all this is to say, I've been trying to move away from that style of deck in my design, not reward that style of deck. Is that a concern that you have as well?
So it's kind of weird. Like it feels like I've just kind of fallen into that just because it seems like people have been, at least kind of locally, have been not valuing fixing as much as they should. But
Mm-hmm.
like I'd say for the past like year and a half, I'd say if I want to ballpark it, like trying this artifact thing where Matt Kranztuber, aka Cranny, was whenever he powers up his cube, he would add like a bunch of artifacts and like artifact aggro support and stuff like there was a group chat I was in and where he would share pictures from it and be like, dude, this is, post like, decks with Arcbound Ravager and cranial
Yeah.
plating. I'd be like, what? Like, what is this? This is really cool. And then it took me a while. Sometimes when I make changes, it tends to take me a very long time. And it was kind of awkward too, because I would kind of go through the changes and then kind of have to back them out for cube draft night
Hmm.
when we do it weekly. And then I would just like very slowly eventually figure out what I wanted to do. And, eventually I just cut a bunch of stuff to make room for more artifacts because, like, if you want Arcbound Ravager and Cranial Plating to be cards that have actual payoff, you can't really have the artifact sections that a lot of cubes have, which is usually like about the same, usually smaller than Wooburg, because it's like you can try all this stuff to make payoffs work. You can put in all the Pia Nalars and
Hmm.
whatevers and the blade splicers in the world, but it's still just not going to be enough payoff. And I think that's another thing too, kind of going to that statement about how my cube design has kind of changed over the years, trying to figure out like what the actual payoffs are, because that's how people who are in the trenches refer, just like that's how they look at formats in terms of just like, here's the payoff for going into this deck. Here's the payoff for going into monocolor aggro or whatever. Here's the payoff for doing this. And like that kind of stuff wasn't really discussed much in terms of the lexicon. It was just like, here's what you can do. Here's not why you should do it. What payoff for +1/+1ing all your dudes. So like when I did the artifact thing, I, just like shifted my cube and something had to give because I got to find room somewhere. Most of it came from multicolor.
Right.
It made me take like this really just like cutthroat approach to it because like I think it's easy for cubes to get bloated with multicolor because the
Yeah.
cards look good on their own, just like something like a Dragon Lord Atarka, or not Atarka, oh, that too, like Dragon Lord Atarka or like
Hmm.
Dream Trawler, I think is a very good example of a card that looks very good. And it's, a solid card when you're in that archetype. It's very limited in like the decks that want it. It's either that deck or the Trenchcoat deck, where it's
Hmm.
like Dream Trawler, especially because it's not very splashable.
No, it's white, white, blue, blue in the casting cost. Or there
Yeah.
was that Niv Mizzet recently who was red, 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 blue, 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 just totally
Oh,
uncastable.
yeah. I was about to say, good luck casting that ever. Like,
Yeah.
you're either is it or you're very, very, very like your mana fixing's got to be super on point. Like,
Yeah. And even if you're in Is It, there's no guarantee that you can cast that thing. How often is it that you've got 3 red sources and 3 blue sources on turn 6?
yeah, you also have to weigh against like, do you want to play Mutavault in this deck with
Yeah.
this kind of thing going on? And it's just like often, I think Sir Fungelot had like a good Reddit post about kind of, I forget the terms he used, but it's kind of like some cards reward you for being in a combination and some pull you towards it. If
Yeah.
you're in a, you're starting your draft, you're not going to go Simic because you see a Mystic Snake. You're not going
Right.
to be like, oh man, look at this. I'm going Simic
Yeah.
now. It's not going to happen. You might for an Oko.
Yeah.
You might for Hydroid Crisis. You see that and like, might try to do that. And conceivably you could splash it. But like you're not gonna go that way even for like an Assassin's Trophy or like a Knight of Autumn.
No.
And it's also just so easy to overload your cube with a bunch of cards that again look good and are good on rate, but it's just like very few decks want them. And I think that kind of contributes to where if somebody has a lot of those kind of cards that realistically those decks like the Azorius deck probably isn't going to take the Dream Trawler super high and it's probably going to try to wheel it or the other deck can just poach it on just like on the low picks. I've definitely done that before where it's just like, all right, here's this tricolor dragon, here's this Intet, sure, I'll just take this 14th pick and maybe beat somebody over the head with the ham sandwich or something, or like a Maelstrom Wanderer or whatever. Usually whenever I see 5-color control being oppressively good is usually a meta issue. And I think that's another thing where it's, you introduce something into the ecosystem and the ecosystem can't handle it or it's just not, in sync or whatever. And I don't know. I mean, I haven't really seen a whole lot of 5-color control. Usually it's mainly just more aggressive stuff.
Well, so you've been collecting some good tips for aspiring designers or those of us who are well on the path already. Your advice has included pay attention to one's aggro section, make sure that that's adequately supported, and put some pressure on the environment. Pay attention to one's gold section, consider running fewer gold cards than you might be, and really focus on those that have effects that are powerful and unique, not readily replaceable. Like Assassin's Trophies, a great card, super cute card, but also it's pretty similar to a Doom Blade or something.
Yeah, all things considered, it's like a lightning helix versus like a searing spear.
Mm-hmm.
It's better, but how much, and is it
Yeah,
worth it for, you know,
right.
kind of thing. To use another, to go back to the cooking analogy, kind of one of the things that kind of helped me a lot in terms of my overall design, like when you're cooking something, like there's those little brown bits that are at the bottom. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
usually like the term. It's in it's like a culinary term. It's called fond.
Mm-hmm.
F-O-N-D. It's like a French term, and like usually a lot of people will just like clean it and not do anything with it because it's dirty. It's not you want to clean that off, but
Yeah.
a lot of the times that's where a lot of flavor is in
Yeah,
terms
you
of
splash some wine in there or something, some vinegar,
yeah, you
scrape
just
that up.
wine, beer, water, any kind of liquid to just use that, those brown bits to usually make sauce or something. Sometimes you just have to really go at it with like a wooden spoon or a plastic spoon and just like scrape it with some liquid to
Yeah.
deglaze the pan, but usually it's worth it. And I feel like people tend to in magic terms, like leave value on the table with stuff like how decks, just like asking people after the draft, like, what did you think of this card? How did this deck do? Or more importantly, just like how finding out how decks are. And I think that's something I tended to do. I forget when I started doing it in articles, but just like referencing 3.0 decks or just like taking
Mhm.
pictures of them. Because like
Yeah.
when I started doing it, when I had the idea to start doing it, it's 2020. I'm pretty sure everybody's listening to this either has a smartphone or knows somebody who has a smartphone, and just like taking a picture of those decks,
Yeah.
even if the idea is like you'll remember those decks, you probably won't. And if like you have camera storage space, like you can also just like email it to yourself as like a zip file, being like, all right, here are the decks from this, and just like using a little piece of paper or dice or something. It's like a 3 and then a 0 or something, or a 2 and a 1, or like a 0. You can also just like use a D20 and say like 20. Send it to yourself in an email and just like title it the day of the draft, like 3/1/2020, and just having that information just to look back on. Because I remember looking for cuts in my cube, but I was like, all right, I'm looking for some red cuts. What cards have I not remembered doing much in draft? Looking through, racking my brain. Yeah, I remember Firebolt doing a whole lot. And then just like looking through these 3.0 decks and being like, just going through, seeing a good amount of Firebolt. It's not a card that really sticks out in your head. You're not like,
Yeah.
oh man, I drafted this deck. It's got Firebolt. Yeah, just like
Right.
you're bragging to your deck. It's like,
No.
man, I got Firebolt in my deck. It's gonna go 3-0. But
Yeah, and it's never like a pack one, pick one. You're not windmill slamming the thing.
yeah, if I have to pick one, pack one, a Firebolt, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Sad times. Well, maybe you can take some solace now that you know that Firebolt is such an essential component of so many winning decks.
Yeah, and it was just like one of those things where it's just like, of course, it's not like ironclad proof of a good card, but it usually helps to draw some trends, just to like help
Yeah.
you contextualize information because it's so easy to forget that kind of stuff. It's just
Yeah,
like, and
for sure. And I really appreciate that you do that in your articles, that you share those deck lists. I think that that's awesome. That's an innovation and one that's super useful. Like you say, it gives context. It shows what sort of deck do you want to play the new Elspeth in? Like, is she a card that goes in a control deck in the same way that bigger Elspeth might or whatever? So anyway, it's great to see where she's successful, where cards are successful.
Mhm.
There's a common objection that you and I are never going to be able to collect as much data as Moto does, for instance, as Wizards can with their
Oh
cube.
yeah,
the amount of data that we can collect feels like a drop in the bucket and maybe close to irrelevant, even potentially misleading. So anyway, I wonder what you say to that kind of objection.
Yeah, like eventually, even with like the small sample sizes we have, it's hard to really draw conclusive data. Like it's very hard to say really absolutist statements, but honestly, I'm not really a big fan of absolutist statements anyway. Like,
Well, then you're not a Magic player.
oh yeah, that's true.
You're absolutely not a Magic player. I'm trying to be
Ah,
absolutist.
nice. There you go. Again, I think it's another like macro micro thing. It's not so much the individual cards, but if you see like cards that go in archetypes struggling, it can help identify stuff that's going on. Like if your Savannah Lions type, if all of your white 2/1s are all performing terribly, that means something. And it's
Yeah.
up to you to probably figure out what. It usually either means like the so it means generally like the deck is performing poorly. It's up to you to find out why it's performing badly. Like, is it a meta problem? Is it, like if for some reason, like you look at, let's say for example, you're tracking your data and like Mardu Woe Reaper is, or actually let's try a different one. I was gonna say, let's do Soldier of the Pantheon.
Yeah.
So you can look at it and you can say it's performing badly, and you can be like, okay, what's going on? Is there not enough multicolor? Is it, do I need more soldier payoffs? Do I need more human payoffs? Do I need white aggro payoffs to be better? Is format two hostile to white aggro, and why? Like, what are those factors that are contributing to it? Like, it presents those questions to you,
Yeah.
and you have to know how to answer those questions. It can't
Right.
it's not the answer.
Yeah. And even for cube designers who aren't doing this kind of research with the aim of developing an article, as you often do when you're testing the new cards, this is still useful information not only for evaluating cards in general, but also for learning something about one's own environment. If you see that White Weenie is being drafted at a low rate and or it has a low win rate, you should be asking the questions that you're describing about whether White Weenie needs some additional payoffs, or it needs to be bolstered, or it needs more one drops. But also it could just tell you something about the predilections of your own draft group,
Yeah.
which can help you make decisions about how you design moving forward.
Yeah. And that can be a thing too, where it's just like sometimes I remember hearing a lot of just like if an archetype is underperforming, the idea of draft it and beat them with it, and then
Uh-huh.
people start drafting it more. And it's like, I don't know, it's kind of naive because it assumes other people are going to do it. And it also assumes like it's not just like player skill with that certain archetype. Like it just assumes a lot of weird stuff in terms of, I've never really been a big fan of like that idea of just like if you beat them with it, it'll do it. And that's another
Yeah.
thing too. It's like if you look at an archetype, it also could be like, what are the tools the other archetypes have? Like, is your removal not that good? Like if the aggressive decks are doing super well, but all of your removal is expensive removal and 187 creatures, that's probably an issue. That's probably going to
Yeah.
cause that to occur, but it's not easy for you to see based on if you're just looking at the raw data, because it can lead you to weird conclusions. It's just like, okay, this card is too good, I can't do this, or whatever. It can make you think like Jackal Pup is too good, I can't have it in my cube anymore. Designing a cube, having a cube, just like tinkering a cube is just like this long, just like this long process. And it's as involved as you really want it to be. Like,
Yeah.
you can just make small changes. You can go super in depth. And like,
Mm-hmm.
to draw on the food analogy, some people, just like if they want to watch like a show like Good Eats, they want to learn they want to learn the history of potatoes, like how they were brought here, how they were like a member of the nightshade family, how they got domesticated, what different kinds of potatoes there are, and like what goes well with what, and like all this. And other people just want dinner.
Yeah.
Some people just don't care. It's just like Cube is, we're all just, especially nowadays, we're all just spinning in this rock filled with water and I guess disease right now. We're all in this world just trying to figure out what we want to do, and how you want to approach your cube, your design, everything. We're all just trying to figure it out, and we're all just trying to make an environment that works. Just like trying to find a balance. I mean, I think we all tend to have different balance, just ideas in cube, what we want from our cubes.
Yeah.
Some want to do broken stuff. Some want, just like a balanced environment. Some want to recreate, just like just like environments where cards that they remember from their youth would shine. Maybe some people just want to, like emphasize combat or just like how these different game states are, and, just like wanting to make, just like reward players for playing well, or, spikiness. And, just so many people have different types of design ideologies. And that's just, I think that's another thing too, is just being honest with yourself.
Yeah, it's important to understand what you want from Cube and to design to that purpose. I totally agree. And for me, I have that kind of great watchmaker in the sky mentality, at least in the sense that I appreciate Cube for being a creative project and for being a system design sort of project, but then also one that gets to be played and that brings, I hope, a joy or like fun experiences to people, and is an opportunity for people to come together and hang out and have a good time and do sweet stuff. So I love all of those aspects of Cube. And this is another reason why our enforced isolation at the moment is a sadness, because Modo doesn't scratch quite the same itch for me. It's fun to be able to cube on there, but I miss the social aspect of it.
Yeah, especially if it's like people, like,
Yeah.
just versus playing with randos or something. And usually,
Yeah.
like, somebody asking, I think in Discord was like asking, like, why did you design your cube or whatever? And like, I think part of it too is just seeing other local cubes and them, it's just like, I can do better. And
Hmm.
I want to say I did.
Yeah. Or at least I'd like to do that. I'd like to have a crack at that. And whatever I do, maybe it's better or maybe it's just different and unique. And I'm putting my own stamp on my own environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've heard people describe cube as kind of like a Rorschach test.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think part of that too is just like seeing cool stuff happen, which,
Yeah.
it may sound primal or basic, but I mean that, I just like seeing cool stuff like that happen. I
Yeah.
don't know.
That's definitely an attraction to Cube for sure. And an attraction for our players, I hope, as well.
If I didn't discover Cube, I'm pretty sure I would have quit Magic a long
Mm.
time ago, probably like 10 years ago. But it's what's kept me in this game for so long. It's just use that food analogy. In, kind of like in South Asian, Pakistani Indian culture, it's just like hospitality. If you go to, like, the term desi, you go to a desi person's house and they offer you like water or tea, just like a huge thing. Or just like you go over and you make food, it's just like this huge thing.
Yeah.
And it kind of is that way with Cube. It's just like you're presenting yourself, your
Yeah.
ideology on design and
Right.
this kind of environment. It's like, I want you all to experience this, or like, here's how I think this should be. Like, here's my recipe or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like how I've also kind of approached Cube too, which just like, I want people to be happy, just like have a good time drafting my Cube. And I don't know, I haven't updated my Cube Tutor or Cube. I haven't even ported over to Cube Cobra. I've just just been so bad about it. I'm just like, I need to jump on it. I need to jump on it, but I just haven't.
You got to get on Cobra. I got to give a plug for my man, Gwen Decker, who's part of the CubeCon
Mhm.
organizing committee too. He's
Yeah, that's
awesome.
why I want to, yeah, just want to get a shout out to him. But I think it's kind of too why I started writing and doing stuff like that. It's just like, it's so cliche, but it's like, if I can help somebody, just like try to figure out what's going on in their cube. If I can help people make more sense of their world, of what they're trying to do. When I first learned about deglazing a pan,
You're sharing the knowledge. Yeah, that's awesome.
or just like cooking potatoes. It's like first parboil them or whatever for like 10 minutes with baking soda and like salt. It's just like, what? And then trying it out and being like, wow, that totally makes a difference.
Yeah, that's great. And your point about how much of our ego is tied up in cube is certainly relevant as well. And I think that is one of the major causes for conflict when it flares up sometimes in our community. There's a notion Freud had in Civilization and Its Discontents. He called it the narcissism of small differences, where he describes communities that share many, many features and that have similar interests as we cube designers do. But then that makes our differences feel all the more stark.
Yeah, like it just kind of amplifies something. Like it,
Right.
once you really zoom in, it's just like it makes it a lot more pronounced kind of thing. as cliche as it is, just be excellent to each other, you know?
Right. That's a good admonition. We're all trying to make people happy with our cube
Yes.
design. We should be excellent to each other.
It's not like, why do you glaze using white wine? You should be using sake instead. And just like,
Yeah.
man, what's wrong with your noob? Lol.
Right.
As long as somebody isn't being like a jerk to me or something, and not like if we have a discussion about a card or something and they're not like straw manning or, you know, being disingenuous. I mean, I think if someone's doing that, which has certainly happened over the years, I was like, okay, you're worth my time.
Yeah.
I'm too old for this.
Yeah, that's good.
It's like I got dishes to do. I got stuff to do around here.
All right.
I was gonna say cast remand on the dishes. I think I'm hoping to make that more of a term, like letting the dishes soak, just casting remand on the dishes.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Yep.
Cast upheaval on them or something. Cast high
Oh,
tide and let the dishes wash themselves. I don't know.
I was about to say, if you cast upheaval, it's kind of just like throwing them all
Yeah.
outside or something.
Yeah.
Or I guess it's like throwing them in the closet. It's just like, and here's everything, and then you just have to deal with it later, I guess. Yeah,
Right.
start them all. It's just like, all
Yeah.
right, how many dishes am I keeping now? 7? All right.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I keep these 2 cups.
Yeah, you have to bin the rest. That's no good. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's not do that to the dishes.
Oh god, that'd be really bad. Yeah, I haven't even talked about soda on this episode. Jeez.
No, we got some hot sauce in though. Or I don't know if that was on tape or not though. Was that on tape? Maybe not.
I don't think it was. I did send you the picture of the Tapatio though.
Yeah, Tapatio, that's your go-to. You've got it right there on the shelf.
I was about to say Tapatio is really good. That's like one of my go-tos are like Tapatio, Valentina,
Mm.
Sriracha, and like a good habanero sauce. I used to have like way too many hot sauces, and then I kind of pared it down because like I have an obscenely high spice tolerance, and my wife doesn't, and I didn't
Yeah.
want to like monopolize like the interior of the fridge for it.
Yeah.
I did
An entire shelf full of hot sauce. Well, listen, Usman, if people want to get a hold of you or if people want to consume your content, where would you direct them?
Cool Stuff Inc. It's weird because a lot of this daily life with the pandemic has been mostly the same for me, but I still feel like I should get this albatross of the Theros review done. I mean, if anything, people, at least somebody finds enjoyment out of these reviews. And
Yeah,
even if
for
it's like
sure.
a distraction for like, 15, 20 minutes, it's a distraction, it keeps, some joy to the world.
People are absolutely looking forward to it. I
Yeah.
know people were pestering you on Twitter the other day
Like,
about it. Not that I'm trying to pressure you to get it done, but there's definitely interest in the community. And speaking for myself, I'm waiting for it with bated breath. I'm definitely looking forward to it.
I appreciate it, man. I tweet on Twitter. Yeah, that works. At Usman the Red.
Yeah, Usman the Red.
I spend a lot of my time on the MTG Cube brainstorming Discord.
MTG Cube brainstorming Discord. Yeah, for sure.
I forget the title, and I'm an admin there, so I should totally
Yeah.
know the name of it. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, that's a good group. It's an opinionated group, but one that's welcoming and that has a lot of great ideas and a lot of great cube minds, great thinkers.
Like I said, we've got a nice crew, and it's just been like it's kind of like my internet home away from home. I
Yeah.
guess home is literal home. I don't know, but it's a nice place. Shout outs to MTG Brainstorm.
Yeah. Well, especially in these troubled times or whatever we're calling them, people need an internet home, I think.
I think so. Yeah, it's nice to have just a place to vent.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the reason why I think I've been holding up so well. Also, just because I'm a hermit anyway, so my life is mostly unchanged aside from Cube Night being canceled. But like, a lot of my social networks, in my youth were online based. It's just like so. A lot of it's kind of like similar. The instruments may have changed, but the song is mostly the same. Just like
Yeah.
I'm kind of like the old man of this, even though I'm not really the oldest man. But just like, hey, kids, remember Wesley Willis, or just like Kiko Man, like Flash, and just being like, oh my God, you're a boomer. I'm just like,
Yeah.
back in my day.
Well, maybe less a boomer and more a patron saint of cube, something like that.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Back in my day.
Old man of the sea. I don't know.
Am I a Jin or a Merid?
You're gonna come leaping at somebody with a knife between your teeth or something.
Oh man. There we go. Jump on. It's the heirloom blade. That's the knife.
That's what it is. Yeah, that's cool.
It's like, how are you playing heirloom blade in your cube? Huh? And then they're saying yes, and I'm like, okay, I'll untap. You're cool. Just. By the way, if you're not playing heirloom blade in your cube, you probably should. It's a great card.
Yeah, it's a good card. Good Usman tech.
By the way, I don't know how I forgot to mention when I was talking about like cube data that I didn't talk about how that ties to Heirloom Blade, because I was like, this card looks pretty good. Like, it's got a decent rate. And then I looked at my 3-0 decks. I'm like, this could work here. Like, this tribal mesh works. It's like, yeah. That one's not so great, but whatever. It's like, this could work.
Right.
I think Heirloom Blade taught me a lot about cube design. Just like, don't get caught up in the additive distraction. Like, sometimes it's easy to look at small differences, being like, this isn't grafted war gear. No, it's not. It's slightly different.
Yeah.
Being able to draw from old data is being able to use that information. I think I'll do that. That's my Twitter tagline. Heirloom Blade taught me how to design my cube.
Wow. Okay, that's good. I like it. Usman in a tweet. So thank you so much for being on, Usman. It's been just a total treat to have you on and to be chatting with you. This has been a lot of fun.
Agreed.
I've gotten a lot out of the conversation. I appreciate your historical perspective and, more than that, your design acumen, which you've been so generous about sharing with the world for so many years. I know I've learned a huge amount from you, and my cube is better for it.
Thank you.